Hello and welcome back to another episode of Just Stories with BT, the podcast. This is extremely exciting because we are continuing on with season 2, which is focusing on just amazing different female executives, especially in kind of underrepresented leadership industries like the mattress and furniture industry, which we both work in. And so welcome Lisa Tan to the show. She is the CMO of Reverie. We have met a couple times at market, but I don't know a lot about her. So I'm really excited to have you.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Brett.
Yes. So we are going to dive into stories. We're going to get to know you a little bit. Here's some of your successes, some of your failures. But first, I want to just give the audience a little bit of backstory on you. That way they can kind of paint a picture of you in their head if they're just listening, unless of course they're watching on YouTube. And so I'm going to introduce you for you. Okay, sound good?
Great. Sounds good.
And then afterwards, tell me what I missed or how I blew it. Okay, so here is Lisa Tan in like 60 seconds. So she was born and grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico. She grew up hiking, skiing, soccer. She was playing piano. And I love that you said, and you did a lot of pretending, which I love as a kid. So did I. Her first job was babysitting, and then she interned for a local paper. She got to cover the rodeo. I'm going to ask you about that. In high school, you played soccer, basketball, and continued with piano. Probably amazing at this point. You had an older brother and an older sister, but they were quite a bit older, which made you like a pseudo only child by the time you got to school. You went to a really small college that's not very accredited called Princeton that no one's heard about, which is an amazing school. And after that, your first job was a research assistant for a psych professor. And then that rolled into you being an editor of books for Scholastic, which I'm gonna ask you about that in a minute. During that time or after that time, you got married to an awesome guy named Martin. You have 2 beautiful little girls. And as far as your career at Reverie, how it started was 10 years ago. You actually volunteered for a consulting project that obviously led to being Reverie and where you are now as the CMO. And here you are. Now you're on Just Stories with BT, the podcast.
Here we are.
What did I miss?
So I think you covered almost everything. In my career, I was at Scholastic Books for a very brief period of time. Then I actually went to a PR agency. And then I spent about 10 years in management and strategy consulting. And that's where I would say I got a lot of my professional chops, and why it made sense for me to do a consulting project, which turned into 10 years of being at Reverie.
Yes. So before I ask you about that, I've got to ask you about Scholastic because yes. I have 2 kids. So I have a junior high or middle school now, and then my daughter's about to be in 4th grade. And I've obviously spent like a fortune of these stupid little Scholastic things that get sent home because the kids are like, it's books, and you feel guilted and they're like brilliant, like how they market everything and whatnot. It's unbelievable. So are you responsible for some of this money I spent?
Well, yes, I suppose I am. And I mean, it is amazing that today they still have the same like super thin tissue paper flyer with, the same gimmicks. And it is amazing how that, that business model continues in the digital age. But yes, I worked in book clubs. So what we did were these things called continuities, which is essentially a subscription to a book club. And we worked with authors on original content. So my first project was for an activity book for 2nd to 4th graders that was based on Peanuts cartoon characters. So, it was like Snoopy does math, like Snoopy says, let's make a craft. So that was fun. Although at the end of that, I really didn't like Peanuts cartoons anymore. And then after that, I worked on a book series called How to Be Great at Everything. And that was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny because I grew up actually, my dad was an elementary principal and my mom worked for the California Highway Patrol as a graphic artist. And so she did a lot of painting and a lot of illustration. And so like kind of my whole childhood, every few years, my parents would release a new kids book. So I was always kind of like,
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't seem like a big deal as a kid, but like as an adult now I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, this was incredible. It wasn't like they sold bazillions of copies, but they sold quite a bit and they had, a certain amount of books. And there was a few that were like loosely based on some of the stuff that I did or my sister did, which was cool. You know what I mean? It's fun to like look back now and seeing like what the kids read now and versus what I read. It's just a little bit different, I would say.
That's awesome. And not because I worked at Scholastic, but because I believe it, I don't think a kid can ever have too many books.
Agreed. Agreed. So tell me, you said in your, or I said in your intro, that you interned, for a local paper. What was that like, as a young kid?
It was really cool. I think I was probably a freshman in high school, and my friend's older brother had been an intern at the newspaper, and he was graduating. So they were looking for someone to kind of fill that intern role. And I had always been interested in writing and maybe journalism. And so I was given the opportunity to be an intern. And in my first period there, the sports editor, and mind you, Los Alamos is about 20,000 people. So there's one high school, there's one middle school, and there's one little town newspaper, which I don't believe even exists anymore. So the sports editor went out of town and there was nobody to cover for her. So I got to cover some pretty awesome sporting events, including rodeo, which is a big thing in the Southwest. And I did not have the lingo down perfectly, but I got like a 2-page spread for my first entree into journalism, which was pretty
Nice.
amazing. And rodeo is such a culture, and it's if you've never been to a rodeo, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, I have been there. Yeah, they're really funny. We went to one and I was in Montana for my buddy. It was actually for his bachelor party. One of my friends has a big ranch out there, and we went. And just randomly, we had no idea it was there, but my buddy was like, "Hey, the rodeo's actually on tonight. We should go." And we were like, "Rodeo?" It ended up being like one of the funniest nights of all time. Like it was a blast. It was much funnier than I
Great.
thought. Like a lot of the stuff that happens between things, and yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, it's
Um,
pretty cool.
I love what you said too about, the paper being smaller and, you learning how to do different things. Cause I'm a big proponent of when people ask me, especially for like career advice, I'll speak at, or I used to pre-COVID, I used to speak at the college I went to, like every year I'd go back and speak, and people would always ask about, career advice. And I always recommend, hey, if you have an opportunity out of school to work for a smaller company, like do it, because I always felt like you do a lot of things when you work for a smaller company. Like you wear a lot of hats and you learn so much, versus like going out of school and I'm going to go work for, Hertz Rent a Car and do this one little sales thing and, work up the ladder, whatever it is. It's cool, but you don't learn a ton. Whereas like when you're involved in something where you get to do a lot of things, like you show up and you're interning and all of a sudden you're writing a paper on rodeo. You know what I mean? Like you get to do and learn a lot of things, and I think it catapults people into a lot of really cool careers.
It does. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and you have to be unafraid to jump in and fail, or maybe not fail. But yeah, I agree. It's nice to have a balance, and every person is different in the beginning of their career. I think big companies teach you to be a professional, but smaller companies definitely teach you to be resourceful and gritty.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I ask you to tell a few stories, give the listeners, for anyone who might not be familiar with Reverie, give us like the 10,000 foot, 30-second overview on Reverie and what you guys are all about.
Awesome. So I always like to start with our mission. Reverie is on a mission to help people live better lives through the power of sleep. So everything we do is intended to help people wake up feeling amazing and ready to conquer their lives. Our primary products are adjustable power bases and customizable technology like our Dream Cell mattress that really fits perfectly with an adjustable base. We do a lot to incorporate technology that users are already using in their homes, like, the Internet of Things, Alexa or Google Home, to incorporate into the bed so that you are creating as a consumer the best possible sleeping environment you can have.
Nice. And obviously, we mentioned it up front, but how soon in the process of Reverie starting were you involved?
So Reverie has its 18th birthday this month. So I'm kind of amazing that that we're that old as an organization and as people, I guess. I joined about 10 years ago. So the company was already 8 years old. Martin had already cut his teeth in the industry and done a lot to grow the organization. And when I joined, it was kind of a pivot point to shift away from manufacturing primarily private label for big bedding brands to developing more of a brand name and relationships with individual retailers.
Nice. And so when you kind of think back over the last 10 years, you know, I would love to know, like, is there a specific time or story that you always remember that's really funny or entertaining that you love to tell?
This is a little embarrassing, but I think it's pretty
Yes,
funny.
those are the
Um,
best.
I've done I've done several things out of passion for promoting the brand that have, really they make my face turn red at this point. But Reveries, so we started doing PR shortly after I joined. We hadn't really engaged with a PR firm or gone out there and tried to get any recognition beyond the trades until about 2012, 2013. So our first debut in the Wall Street Journal was actually this fabulous front page personal journal article about working from bed. And so we had all these professionals talking about how they used adjustable power bases to work from bed. Pretty awesome and very suitable to the COVID world these days.
Yes.
However, there was no mention of me in that article. My first named mention in the Wall Street Journal, and only, by the way, was an article asking executives about what they do to relax outside of the office. And this woman calls me and interviews me, and I tell her all about how I love to wash the dishes. And her response was, wow, like, you're so poetic about how, the water's running and it puts you in this Zen state and you feel the sense of accomplishment. Oh, this is so poetic. And then, the article comes out and my phone is just blowing up with friends, teasing me about how I love to wash the dishes. So it's a pretty funny story.
I would put that in the
And
paper
then,
too. Like, you might be the only person. This could be one of, like, what is there, 7 billion people in the world? You might be it.
right, sense of accomplishment. So
So
that's my funny story.
I love it. I always tell people I have no idea why. I think it stems back to when I was a kid, but when I do the dishes, I put everything away first and then I go back and do the silverware, like put it away. And I've never not done it that way in my entire life. Never once. And I don't know, like, and I've even thought, like, I should just break this just to prove I can do it. And I can't do it. So apparently it's some weird, like, OCD thing. I think it was because when I was a kid, my parents actually used to divvy up, like, the dishes between my sister and I. Like, one of us was responsible to put all the
Okay.
silverware away and one would do the dish part. And I just hated the
Got it.
silverware. It was like, because my parents do this thing that I think is so dumb. And so if you do this, sorry, I apologize, but they have like 2 sets of silverware, but they use every day. And so then it's like always mixed up. And I'm like, why not just use one set? So it's like such a hassle. So anyways, there's my OCD.
So you had to parse out which set was which. I get it. Yeah.
And it's
Well,
like,
it
there was
sounds
no
like you're
rhyme
pretty
or
well
reason
trained
of
on
where
top
it
of
goes. It was always just like chaos, So anyways. Uh, so tell me, when you, your first Wall Street Journal, though, that talked about all the campaign with what people do, was that a successful one? Because obviously, like, bases have come so far over the last decade, because it was hospital beds, then we had to kind of, for anyone involved in it, it's like you had to overcome that kind of thing. And then it was like, oh, it was just for
Right.
elderly. Then you had to overcome that. And then it was like, no, it's for everybody.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would say it's still a very, the category itself is not well known outside of the industry. And there's so many consumers to this day. I think, this is referencing a fairly old study at this point, but 30% of consumers have never heard of an adjustable bed before, and they might make that association to a hospital bed. Only 9% of consumers are sleeping on adjustable bases right now. So there's still this huge opportunity in the category itself to get people to understand why an adjustable base is so amazing for people that aren't, post surgery or having trouble getting out of bed because they're of a certain age. So yeah, I mean, it was great because, we were interviewing all these, or we weren't, but the Wall Street Journal was interviewing lawyers and, other professionals that maybe they were in their office all day sitting at a desk. When they get home, you don't turn off as a lawyer, spending some time in bed or on weekends, working. Now, it went over really well, like really well received. And it was an awesome way of kind of pushing, adjustable power base conversations into the public domain and into a lifestyle domain, which is where we try to live, not the hospital realm. So yeah, that turned out pretty well. Since then we've kind of, it's this balance we play between, yes, use your adjustable bed. It's going to make whatever you do in bed more comfortable. And really, you should have a very clean bedroom where you're not working from bed and you're not sitting in bed watching TV. But you know what? Putting your head up to read, totally fine.
Yeah, it is tough, like I can relate to that for sure, especially like where I'm at Avocado, everything we do is organic and sustainable. And so, we're very much trying to figure that out as well, because at the end of the day, like I talk to people, when I talk about adjustable bases, I always let people know, because a lot of people don't understand that, if you elevate your feet and your back slightly so that your feet are above your head and your blood is flowing really easily, and you turn on the massage so that your blood starts flowing naturally without your heart pumping, that's what slows your heart rate down and makes you relaxed. So technically it's a really natural way to relax yourself, but it's just weird thinking like, I'm going to use something that I'm plugging into the wall and then think natural, it's like a weird kind of thing. But the truth is, if you think about, this is a stat that blows my mind. You may have heard about it, but so obviously our industry is what, like 17-18 billion dollars in the States or something as a whole. But I heard a couple of years ago from this pharmaceutical guy that basically in the United States alone, there's over $40 billion worth of sleep aids sold every year. So prescription drugs, sleep aids, stuff, so people are popping pills 3 times as big as the industry, like, so they're just putting the Band-Aid on instead of actually trying to figure out like, why aren't I sleepy, which is horrible.
Yep. No, that's totally right. And it's not just sleeping aids. It's also things that are even further afoot, like coffee, right? We are, as a nation, as a world, very sleep deprived. 75% of Americans are not getting the sleep that they need to be highly functioning. And we don't address the preventive issues, right? We address, we're putting Band-Aids on left and right with sleep aids, with coffee, with all sorts of other things to stimulate us and pull us out of that exhaustion every day. So when I start getting super passionate, it's always about helping people understand sleep itself and what it can do for you if you really spend some time focusing on it. There's no point in going to the gym if you've only had 4 hours of sleep. It's not going to make you healthier.
Yep. Yeah, I was actually just reading this article yesterday from this guy. He's like one of these famous, like, workout influencer guys or whatever, but he had he put this whole program together. He's been doing studies for like 15 years, on all these different body types and metabolism and, what you eat and all these different things. And he just put out this big report that was like, this big article. And it just said like, all of this is pointless if you don't get a good night rest after your workout. He goes, it's completely a waste. So he's like, it doesn't matter. So he's like, if you're only sleeping 4 hours, or if you think, you can get up at 4 a.m. to get your workout in, but you don't sleep, he's like, all the benefits are gone because all of the muscles aren't regenerating while you're sleeping. So he's like, what are you doing? So, but it was a really good article, because I think there's a lot of people in that rat race of like, oh, I got to get up super early so that I can get my workout in and then I go to work. But then they stay up late doing all these other things. And then it's all not productive,
Right. No, I mean, there are at least 3 pillars of health and well-being, and they are, they're fitness, nutrition, and sleep. And arguably sleep is the most important. Sometimes I've seen a 4th pillar thrown in, which is stress. And you can adjust the other 3 to address the stress, but they are all interrelated. And I think nothing that we do can be isolated. And so often people forget that sleep is a critical pillar, for sure.
Yeah. So tell me, especially, and it can be before, but especially at Reverie over the last 10 years, and becoming the chief marketing officer in an industry like ours, did you ever come across a time when, you had a big setback or a failure, and, could you tell us about it?
Sure. I mean, certainly, I think we fail every day to some extent. And, it's been such an amazing ride the past 10 years at Reverie, but there are so many failures that I could talk about that I've learned from. One in particular, though, that I think, applies to the industry and kind of the idea of representation in an underrepresented industry is in 2015, 2016, we were doing a photo shoot, and I was really excited to pull this photo shoot together that was really intended to showcase the way you feel when you wake up after sleeping on Reverie. So spent a lot of time working with an amazing photographer in California, putting together a talent pool that would be representative of waking up refreshed and representative of the customer. So we had some interracial couples, we had some mixed race models, and put together this gorgeous photo shoot. I was so proud of it. And then as we started to roll these assets out, we encountered some pushback from some of our retailers who said, well, that's sure progressive, or, oh, we're not going to use those photos. We even had somebody adjust the skin color of the models in the photos.
What?
And I was shocked. I was shocked. I was disappointed, and I was frustrated because we were trying to create, a campaign that was going to be representative of the population and of potential customers. And we were dealing with some people with a very traditional sense of what an advertisement should look like and who should be representing an aspirational lifestyle. So to me, it was a setback, and it felt like a failure at the time, to be trying to not even push something, just to be, showcasing a belief in representation and have that much pushback. That was 2015, 2016. I think that we've come a ways since then, but it's a good example of some of the challenges that we face in understanding who our consumers are and in speaking to them in a way that's going to make the experience of shopping an inclusive one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so sad, right? And I think that was one of the reasons why I think our industry in particular was so ripe to have people come in from the outside and just pick it apart, because
Absolutely.
DTC brands weren't industry folks at all, right? They came from, the Bay Area and different, New York and these different places that are much more progressive. And so the great thing about their companies is they're very diverse. They're very, from everybody, male, female, how you look, where you're from. And I think that one of the reasons, we talk about from an advertising perspective, I think they resonated just so much more with the daily consumer than the old school brands did, because they were just getting left behind with these old ideologies. I can remember in a similar case when I was at Living Spaces, we had so they still have a partnership with the designers Nate and Jeremiah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they have shows on, I think, HGTV or whatever, these great designers. So they launched an exclusive campaign at Living Spaces and made the TV commercial, and obviously, and so Nate and Jeremiah are married. They're like a married gay couple, and they ran these ads everywhere. And I remember we had a meeting the next month, and they were going over supply chain, all this different stuff, and they broke out where Nate and Jeremiah were selling and where it wasn't. And they started showing the responses we were getting when the commercials ran. And this isn't that long ago. This was maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I remember just feeling oh my God, I thought as a society we were a lot further along than we are in some places. Yeah. I was shocked. Shocked at some of the stuff people were writing. It was just awful. But credit to the CEO Grover and everything. He said, no, this is the direction we're going. And they, kept that relationship strong. And, it just is what it is, but over time, hopefully some of that stuff gets better, but it really opens your eyes,
Absolutely. And I think the takeaway from it, which I did make a mistake maybe a couple of years later on a different campaign where we were, it was all about new moms. So guess who really benefits from an adjustable base? A pregnant or new mother, because it's hard to get out of bed. Your body changes drastically, where you feel pressure and pain changes. And then post-birth, the recovery can be significant. So an adjustable base is perfect for that audience. And there were really no campaigns at the time directed to new moms or pregnant moms. So put this big campaign together and launched it. And, it was well received. But what I realized after the fact is when we were trying to figure out who the actual target was it the mother herself? Was it a second-time mom who's already spent a lot on the bassinet and all the outfitting of the baby room and realized, oh, that was kind of a waste? Is it the mother's parent? Who is it? And I was living it at the time. And so I think that the takeaway for me, which is a similar takeaway to a lot of advertising, is it's never about you. You never know who the customer is. You have to go out and learn who the customer is, but you must always separate your experience from the customer experience, no matter who you are, to get it right. And that's where it's awesome to see, again, with D2C brands, how testing has evolved over the past 5 to 10 years, as far as I'm going to understand my customer by testing every possible iteration of a campaign. And that's how you learn in real time. But for me, that was something where I learned, wow, if I had approached this in a slightly different way that wasn't so personal, we would have gotten to our answer a little bit faster.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that, because I think it's a lesson that everybody kind of has to learn on their own, as they go through business, but especially in marketing and sales training, I think it happens a lot too, where, we see things out of our scope. And so sometimes it unfortunately gives you a little bit of blinders, and you think this is what the customer's understanding, or this is what's resonating. I remember with one of my previous companies, we had redone this brand, and 2 years in, we thought, oh man, everyone knows it and they know our brand story and all these things. So we did one of those, advertising marketing things where you bring in the 40 people and we put them in 4 different rooms, groups of 10, and they had to put these different brands up on the wall and say all this stuff. And you're behind that glass just watching, you can't interact. Mm-hmm. It might've been the most painful 2 hours of my life, because it was like, out of the 40 people, no one remembered anything we had done, none of our advertising, like nothing, and then some of the people even thought they did and would explain someone else's brand story or whatever. And you're just like, oh my God, like I was really off here,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a great mentor of mine, this guy, Matt Anderson. When I was developing training back in the day, I used to do training development for like 10, 12 years. And I remember I had a course one time that didn't get great review or didn't get great results after I'd done this big training initiative. And he looked over the materials and he said, you know what the issue with this is that you designed this for you, right? Like, this is how you sold, this is your personality. You're very outgoing. You can talk to anyone. You can make jokes. You do all these different things. He's like, but when you're designing training for a whole organization, he's like, you actually have to design for the C student so that anyone can do it, and make sure you do small chunks with a bunch of practice on the basics. He goes, your top people will be good anyway. He's like, but you can't make your training for the like A+ person, because that's only a certain small percentage, and it was like, but it was a great learning for me, because ever since that happened, it's like, 15 years ago, like I've always thought about like, okay, who is this actually for? How do I learn, like you said? And then how can I make it so everyone can understand? You know what I mean?
Great lesson. Totally makes sense. And I mean, that's really what it's about with everything. I think a lot of the failures that I've experienced at Reverie over the years all ultimately boil down to, are we giving our customer the best experience possible? And actually, that's where I've been spending a lot of my time over the past 2 years, is really focused on the customer experience. How can we make sure that whatever we do internally well, that we're delivering it in a way that's going to resonate with the customer, and that we're designing in a way that's going to resonate with the customer? Because we may have super high tech beds, but when our customers are 75 years old and calling in to do some troubleshooting, are we giving them the right experience? And in many ways, it's similar to your example. It's so important to think from somebody else's shoes.
Oh, for sure. So tell us a story about success. When was a time when, you maybe, after something happened, you sat back and were just like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this is amazing.
Well, I would say, joining the industry and joining a company that, my husband has co-founded and been running, was a bit daunting. I had worked for much larger organizations. So when we talk about, the difference between learning in a small environment versus learning in a large environment, I came into the role really, tackling something I'd never really experienced before. I didn't have a playbook. And so, I can't even tell you how much I learned, how steep my learning curve was. And I would say still is in many ways. We never stop learning. But, maybe a few years ago, it really hit me that what makes success for me and for what we've done is thinking about how the product we sell is just part of the story. And what we really are doing is helping people live better lives. We're able to deliver on our mission through what we do. And that's partly through the product and how we design the product and how we think about it and how we're focused on the customer. But it's also on some of the ancillary content that we create. So, I go back to the 3 pillars of health and thinking about the missing component in some sales conversations, which is when we think about why a customer is coming in to purchase a new mattress. It could be for a variety of reasons, but often an underlying theme is that they're not sleeping well. So we built out this program called Sleep Coach, which has gone through several iterations over the years, but ultimately it boils down to working with our advisory board of sleep scientists to develop some curriculum that we use internally to train our sleep specialists who are on the phone, maybe selling, our service team, our wholesale sales team, so that when we have these conversations with customers, we're thinking about the environment, we're thinking about sleep habits, and we're thinking about the product and how they all work together to provide and to deliver on our mission. So that was a really, I think when we got to that point, I kind of felt like I've been working on all of these things and they're all starting to come together into this beautiful place where I understand that we really are delivering on this mission that we talk about every day. And that's an amazing feeling. And I think that helps the team carry through difficult days and, get over challenges that, it's easy to get lost in the weeds. It's easy to get distracted by supply chain challenges. When you think about what you're delivering to you're actually here. I mean, yeah, we're not saving lives every day. We're not out there on the, we're not first responders, but being able to do something that's going to help people be healthier and more comfortable is really something that I'm proud of. And I'm proud that we've taken it to that next level where there's an educational component with everything that we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I remember I saw that at market a couple years ago for the first time and loved the concept. I think that what's cool about what you said from a success standpoint is that, I feel like great brands and great organizations understand that if you really want to deliver a great experience to your guest, it can't just be A and B, like here it is, you bought it, here you go, and it's over. Like it really needs to be more experiential and the process needs to loop around. And in our industry, it's funny because, excuse me, because it really is an interesting cycle, and explain a little bit more on the Sleep Coach. How does that work?
Well, how it works now and really where it's landed is we have an advisory board of sleep scientists and doctors and other people who have interaction with sleep, right? They may be in a sleep lab, they may be a sleep doctor where they're interacting with people that may be using our product every day and are coming in with sleep issues, just to really understand, right? What are the sleep issues out there and how can we tie them back to our consumer? And so from there, then we develop content in various formats for our internal team and for RSAs to just understand the basics of sleep. And then how do those basics of sleep tie back to a conversation with somebody who's walked in your door to buy a new mattress? And it can be a small part of the conversation, but sometimes it turns on a light bulb. Wow.
Yeah.
People aren't going to come in saying, I'm here because I'm not sleeping well. They may say, I'm here because my mattress is sagging, or, I'm here because my mattress is old. And that often has a strong correlation to I'm not sleeping well.
Yeah.
So being able to ask a few questions to kind of pull out what is really troubling the customer is important. And we've also seen that when we have a team that understands the science of sleep and how it impacts their daily lives, they're going to start making changes in their lives too. And when you start seeing, team members come in or saying, oh, I'm not going on that coffee run with you, I have a caffeine cutoff of 2:00. How does that translate into, the well-being and the happiness of our team? And you do start to see it, especially when we go, periodically we'll go through a push or a challenge around sleep. And it's a great way of building a team. It's a great way of building a culture, and it's a great way of helping to define that our product is so much more than just an adjustable bed
Yeah.
to the partners we're working with and to the end consumer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that the beautiful thing about what you guys are doing is that, it's kind of like we talked about earlier with, you don't want, a mattress or an adjustable base or any product for that matter, to be a Band-Aid. So if the reason someone's coming in is because their bed is really old and it's sagging, it's lost its support, well, that could just be the reason why they're not sleeping good, because their back is creaking. But a lot of times it's other things. So it's like, oh, they just didn't understand, like, what's your room environment like? Oh, well, I've got the TV going before I go to sleep. I got all this light over here. Maybe they don't know. They haven't heard about blue light before bed or whatever it is. Like, there could just be these things that are really making it so they're not sleeping well. And then you put on a bad mattress on top of it. So it's, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, you're trying to also talk someone through the root cause of, hey, why aren't you sleeping good? And here's some tips, which I love. So I want to shift gears a little bit. Obviously this season 2 is just focusing on, these amazing different, female executives, entrepreneurs, and one of the things that I admire about Reverie is, like, if you just go on Reverie and you look at LinkedIn and put Reverie and pull it up and you look down your list of, all of your kind of top people, is how LinkedIn kind of does it. You guys look, at least from the outside, to be very diverse amongst your leadership, and it seems like you've done a really good job. But as you know, when you walk around market in Vegas, our industry is not very diverse. It's a bunch of, a lot of guys that look more like me wearing big box suits, So, what has it been like being, a female executive in our industry specific? And can you talk to that, or any hurdles you've had, or any weird, or anything that's kind of stood out to you about that?
Certainly. I mean, yeah, it's just going from a trade show, or in my previous world, right? I was in New York City. I worked on very international teams or very female heavy teams. So to shift to an industry that's primarily white men is definitely a change. And I think, it comes out in some of the examples I alluded to earlier, where, if everybody around the table is trying to innovate and they all look the same and they all have similar backgrounds, it's just not happening. Innovation happens when you bring together teams that have had different experiences and therefore have different perspectives. So, that's always been the focus with our team building and our staffing, is we want teams that bring a diverse set of backgrounds and experiences together, because ultimately we want to innovate to make customers' lives happier and healthier. And it is challenging. I mean, I think I bristled initially at the environment into which I was thrown, and some of the interactions in those early market years, because it is much more homogeneous than other industries. However, I think you have to get below that layer, and I love what you're doing here, Brett, with this podcast. And I think it all starts with awareness and recognition. And when we get to the point where we're able to have awareness and we are able to recognize where we have an opportunity to change or grow or learn, that's how we progress. And I think the industry has come a long way thanks to efforts like your podcast, and thanks to some of the proliferation of brands out that are not traditional industry brands, starting to appear and interacting more with the end consumer. So overall, I think it's been challenging at times. And I've witnessed negative comments for, like, I know there are some amazing women out there that are buyers at large retailers. And I've seen them, fill roles that were previously occupied by somebody that would be more of an industry stalwart, and really struggle at first with just the level of confidence they have in a woman. And that's disgusting. And I've celebrated the achievements of these women to overcome it, but it's frustrating that they had to take the time and energy to overcome unfair perceptions versus be able to go in and and do the amazing work they do and contribute right off the bat. So, again, I don't have a solution. I've seen it, I've witnessed it, I've experienced it, but the more that we can, as a team, create awareness and be open to having these conversations, the farther we're going to get faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, one of the podcasts I did earlier in the season, I think it was with Katie Law. She's got a chain, but she mentioned something about just that people attract people, and and whether that's from how you think, how you act. But at the end of the day, I mean, she was saying my solution is simple as I've got a lot of amazing females around me, and I think because of that, I'm starting to attract more females, and because it's an industry that, as you mentioned, it's just not something that I think anyone really grows up thinking like, I want to sell mattresses. So already it has that against it, and then you've also got the fact that it was just such a old school, there was a study done, this is a while back, it was like 10 or 15 years ago, but it was like shopping for used cars and then shopping for a mattress was like just above that. You know what I mean? Like that was the scale of like where, and I think it's come a long way, but I still think there's some of that ingrained in society. And so I just think it's not from the outside looking in, like, oh, super attractive place to work, for anyone for that matter. So I think that's kind of all of our jobs now is like, hey, how do we, showcase ourselves and the industry in a way that is appealing for young talent to come in, no matter how, whether it's male, female, no matter ethnicity, whatever, like, and be like, hey, I want to be in that industry because it seems progressive and it's cool and it's changing. And because that's the reality is that it is. And that's it's actually a really fun industry. A lot of people knows each other. In a lot of companies, it's very fast, rapid changing, and there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that if more people knew that, we would get a lot better people. But unfortunately, it's just kind of a little closed thing. So I guess that's what I'm also trying to figure out too, is how do we broadcast out to young people looking for careers to say like, hey, this is actually a cool place to be.
Yep. Well, I think that goes back to making sure that the people who are doing the recruiting and being the face or the representation of the industry reflect who young, talented professionals would aspire to be. And that's, again, where representation matters so much. So if we're pushing, conferences where all the speakers are male, and I've seen that happen. I've been at a conference, an industry conference, where there were only 2 women that spoke during the whole time. And this was 2 years ago.
Wow.
That's not okay, right? That's not going to attract diverse talent. So I think, we have to be very intentional in how we go about recruiting and in how we represent ourselves. I mean, often the least sexy places to be have the most opportunity. So for professionals that are looking to make a change, well, wow, we have a lot of opportunity here to do so. And I think that's the other side of the story. And if we stop talking about how this is a stagnant, industry, and we start talking about how this is an industry where opportunity is ripe and where there's this undercurrent of desire for change, then we can have an amazing decade ahead of us. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you said that. I think that's going to be the trailer for the podcast right there. I'm going to mark down the time. So last thing, I know I said half an hour, 45 minutes, so I'm already over my time limit, but so if somebody wants to get in touch with you, so 2 different things. So first off, I have, a lot of awesome managers, most of all, which are female, and they're looking for mentors in the industry, so I'll definitely, they'll listen and I'll connect them with you. But when it comes to people like wanting to reach out about Reverie, what's the best way to, to do that, and get in contact with you or people at Reverie?
Yep. So, I mean, you can visit our website. You can reach me on LinkedIn. That's probably an easy way for people to search and then, direct message me on LinkedIn. Or you can email me at lisa@reverie.com.
Nice. Awesome. So last question, since you're an adjustable base expert now after 10 years. So what do you believe, gun to your head, is the best way to describe a base? So is it just adjustable base? Is it lifestyle base? Is it power base? I've heard them all. So what do you think is just the best way to describe?
I say it's power base, and that's because the power of sleep is contained in this amazing product.
Yes. Okay, market. Patent that. Power base. Awesome. All right, Lisa. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. And hopefully I will see you next month. You're going to be at market?
I will not be there, but I will send all my love. We will be
Awesome.
there.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
walk by and I'll high five everyone at Reverie that I see.
Sounds awesome. Well, it was great speaking with you today, Brett. Thanks for the
Awesome.
opportunity.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Bye.